Good evening. Welcome to the December 17th, 2024 regular meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission. We are called to order at 6 p.m. Oops. Oh, I got a double wing. Okay. Do we need to make the announcement about Zoom and live streaming?
No.
Okay, very good. So item 2, roll call. Can the recording secretary please conduct roll call?
Commissioner Alpert,
Present.
Commissioner Wallace,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Curtis,
I am present.
and Chair Kuznick.
Here. Thank you. Okay. Item 3, the Pledge of Allegiance, if we can stand. And Commissioner Curtis, would you like to start?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm not sure I got your title correct, but you'll forgive me. Okay. All right, we're moving on to item number 4, public comments or written communications. At this time, pardon me, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any item not already included in tonight's agenda. If you would like to speak, please fill out a speaker card located in the back of the room and submit it to the recording secretary. We will not be taking any public comment via Zoom. So do we have any speaker cards for items not on the agenda?
No.
Very good. No written communications?
No written communication for this item.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. We will move to item number 5, which is additions and revisions. If there's a change, do we have anything we want to adjust here?
I would like to move item number 9.2 up and in front of item number 9.1.
Well, currently the applicant is not here yet for item 9.2. So it may be best to give them the opportunity to get to the chamber.
Do we know why they're not here? Are they stuck in traffic or they're just not here, period?
Indicated he's coming.
You don't want to talk for him?
No.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. We will then just continue with the agenda as we have received it then. Item 6, the consent calendar, 6.1, minutes of the Planning Commission regular meeting, December 3rd, 2024. Do we have a motion to approve?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting of the Planning Commission.
And I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All right, so the motion has passed 4-0. Thank you very much. Going on to item number 7, continued items after the closing of public hearing. There are none. Item 8, continued items, open public hearing. There are none. So we move on to item 9, public hearing, new items. And item 9.1, the public hearing, Bartlett, BR7 residential development. And we are hearing from Mr. Barr.
Good evening. I'm going to provide a brief overview of the staff report, and then I'll turn it over to the applicant to walk through their project plans and architecture. So the applicant submitted development applications for a residential development project on the BR7 site at 2527 to 2542 Camino Ramon. Proposed project consists of 190 residential units, including 118 multifamily townhomes and 72 single-family homes. The property is a housing opportunity site, which allows for 100% residential and complies with the 15% inclusionary housing requirements, and the level of affordability has been structured to qualify for state density bonus, which includes concessions and waivers. And in this case, they're looking for a waiver of the site-wide minimum FAR, and they're also entitled to parking reductions under the state density bonus standards. Based on the concessions and waivers, the proposed project is consistent with the applicable design standards of the general plan, 2040, as well as the zoning designations for the DMU North's development standards. On September 3rd, the Planning Commission held a study session and provided initial feedback on the project vision from the applicant. In addition, on September 26th, the ARB provided feedback on the design and recommended final architectural review and included comments for the applicant's consideration. The applicant submitted revised project plans and a response to both the commission and ARB comments, and those are part of the record. Just as part of their response, I wanted to highlight that the applicant has agreed to enter into a parking agreement for additional parking, guest parking at the northern garage of the office campus located at 2603 to 2633 Camino Ramon. That's the BR3 site. And a condition of approval has been added to the resolution. Also, consistent with the City Walk design standards for what's considered a secondary collector, which is the frontage of this particular project, they are proposing a 7-foot sidewalk along Camino Ramon that includes landscape shade trees. And also they've extended the sidewalk to the northern end of the property in response to comments received. I just want to also mention that there was a discussion in the staff report that relates to an alternative off-site affordable housing concept. That will require separate approvals, but we wanted to make sure that the commission's aware that there are discussions related to this option. However, this approval is not contingent on anything related to that supplemental approval. And should that alternative go forward, we'll have to revisit these approvals that are under consideration tonight. So in summary, the project's eligible for density bonus concessions and waivers. Staff has determined consistency with general plan and zoning, as well as the purpose of the walking district. Additionally, the project is consistent with the scope of the general plan EIR and meets necessary findings for the proposed development applications. Staff is prepared and the city attorney's office has reviewed the draft resolution and determined that it be in compliance with state and local standards, as well as addressing the requisite project context, findings of fact, and all this is for the commission's consideration tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant to do their presentation, unless you have questions of me at this time.
We have, are there questions for staff clarifying before we hear from the applicant?
Let's hear from the applicant first.
Let's go. Welcome.
Good evening, Chair Kuznick and Planning Commissioners. On behalf of Sunset Development, I'm Stephanie Hill. We appreciate the opportunity to return and discuss Bartlett with the Planning Commission this evening. For over 4 decades, Sunset Development has managed Bishop Ranch, ensuring that it remains vibrant, relevant, and positioned for growth. Working closely with the City of San Ramon, Bishop Ranch is transforming into a walkable mixed-use district. The vision for Bishop Ranch is to seamlessly integrate the workplace, retail, entertainment, homes, and parks and open space. Developing a vibrant mixed-use community requires complementary residential options, including multifamily and single-family homes, to accommodate diverse households. Within Bishop Ranch, over 1,400 homes have received project-specific approvals. Summer Hills City Village welcomed first residents earlier this year. Belmont Village is nearing completion and will offer senior homes at the beginning of next year. And Related and Avalon Bays communities offer studio through 3-bedroom apartment homes. Bartlett, across from City Village, includes a total of 190 townhomes and single-family homes. 3-story townhomes are proposed along Camino Ramon, while single-family homes are interior to the community. We have updated our site plan and architecture in response to comments from the Planning Commission, Architectural Review Board, and city departments. Bartlett is connected to the community through 2 main pedestrian corridors, the Iron Horse Trail and Camino Ramon. Iron Horse Trail offers access to Iron Horse Middle School, Central Park, the library, and Marketplace, while Camino Ramon offers connections to Bartlett Pear Park, Lakeside, including Lake Cecilia and Annabelle Lake, and City Center. Internal to the site, there are tree-lined sidewalks offering east-west and north-south connections. The main entry along Camino Ramon is aligned with the City Village entrance across the street. The Planning Commission and ARB focused on the internal gathering places for residents within the space, including the central open space, townhome mews, pedestrian pathway, emergency vehicle entry, and the Iron Horse Trail nodes. The central open space located along Camino Ramon includes multiple gathering places for residents and visitors. Shade is offered through trees, a canopy, and a trellis. Benches, lounge chairs, picnic tables, and a barbecue are available, and the open lawn allows for flexible uses. We've included a rendering to provide a sense of place. This view is oriented from Street C, which is interior to the community, looking towards Camino Ramon with City Village in the background. In the foreground are the shade trellis, the barbecue, and picnic areas. In addition to the central open space area, there are smaller pocket areas throughout the neighborhood. The townhomes are oriented along internal mews. In addition to encouraging neighbor interaction, these areas are ideal for children who are learning how to scoot or ride bikes in a protected area. A meandering pathway extends from the central open space to an Iron Horse Trail node. And the emergency vehicle access area incorporates shade trees and seat walls outside of the right-of-way as another gathering space for residents and visitors. Currently, there is an Iron Horse Trail connection at Executive Parkway. Decorative paving, benches, and landscaping have been added to this area. Similar treatments have been added to 2 informal points further north in the community. Across the street is Bartlett Pear Park, a 2-acre park. The nearest intersection between Bartlett and this park is Camino Ramon and Executive Parkway. It's a signalized intersection with a pedestrian crosswalk and signal, offering easy access across the street. The design incorporates key elements of City Walk and the walking district, contributing to vibrancy along the Camino Ramon corridor. The architecture is inspired by classic row homes and incorporates vertical articulation and gables to reinforce the presence of homes. The townhome buildings vary between 4 and 6 homes, which creates a more pedestrian scaled environment. Front doors in 2 different elevations along Camino Ramon contribute to visual interest. The Planning Commission identified wider sidewalks and fences as priorities along Camino Ramon. We discussed these internally and with city staff and completed multiple design iterations to balance sidewalks, providing shade trees, fences, stormwater treatment, and utilities. Our current design includes wider sidewalks, which have been increased from 5 feet to 7 feet. Alternately, we can reduce the sidewalk width from 7 feet and add a porch fence mirroring the materiality of the second floor balconies to the homes along Camino Ramon. Tonight, we look to the Planning Commission to provide direction on this design coordination. This slide shows from a side view just what the frontage looks like from the buildings to the Camino Ramon frontage, where you have a sidewalk and landscaping on either side. And the next is a rendering of the Camino Ramon frontage. ARB was highly supportive of the proposed Bartlett architecture and focused on enhancements to elevations visible from the public realm. At the Townhome A, we changed the balcony fence pattern from vertical to a grid pattern, given the predominant white vertical batten and board siding. The townhomes with wraparound balconies are along streets A and C. Siding and awnings have been added to visible side elevations. For Townhome B, we changed the garage door color to soften the elevation. And then on the side of Townhome B, we added a pop-out and horizontal siding to visible side elevations. The single-family homes have 3 different floor plans and 3 different elevations. The ARB was highly supportive of these elevations and have not changed substantially from what was previously presented. The Plan 1 is located along Streets B and Streets C, with front doors and patios lining those streets. Plan 2 and Plan 3 are included on the interior streets. As with the townhomes, the ARB was focused on enhanced elevations from the sides. And so this is an example of the rear elevation above the privacy fences being enhanced with added siding at the second floor. ARB recommended adding multiple roof colors to offer variation within the community. And at the pedestrian level, different door colors add interest to a classic color scheme that is otherwise within the community. As outlined in our application materials, Bartlett is seeking a development waiver under the state density bonus. In exchange for providing 15% of homes on site as affordable, the community is eligible for a development waiver. Bartlett is requesting a waiver of the 1.25 site-wide minimum FAR, which precludes the proposed density from being developed. The 29 affordable homes, the 15%, will be proportionately allocated between the townhomes and the single-family homes. So that's 18 townhomes and 11 single-family homes. They will be 5% very low, 2.5% low, and 7.5% moderate. The increase in the very low is what allows us to be eligible for a state density bonus. There was extensive discussion about parking at our prior meeting regarding demand for additional spaces, as well as garages being used for storage rather than for cars. Although eligible for a parking reduction through state density bonus, the Bartlett HOA will enter into a parking agreement for up to 60 stalls at the North Parking Garage at Bishop Ranch 3. A parking study has been submitted, which quantifies and qualifies that this parking is available. In addition, a standard HOA regulation requires garages to be used for parking, not storage. Before concluding, we've included sample architecture from Simmer Hills City Village, given that we've received a lot of commentary about all of the townhomes that are being proposed looking similar. What we'd like to point out is that this is a different architecture than what we're proposing in terms of having flat roofs, more rectilinear facades while we have gables. In addition, there's a very strong blue color, which everyone is seeing as the homes are going up, where we've really relied more on a typical white elevation with pops of color at the ground floor. I appreciate your time this evening. I'm joined by the design team and welcome any questions and comments.
Great. Thank you. Gentlemen, do we have questions for the applicant tonight? Go ahead.
I just
Mr. Albert.
had one. It sounded like you have a choice you want us to advise you on with the stoops and the fence. Do you happen to have a rendering of what it might look like with the smaller sidewalk and maybe the fence there? Or maybe you didn't, I missed it.
Fortunately, Mr. Barr showed me that I can draw on this.
Oh,
so
good. Okay.
You will have an impromptu rendering, which will be a little bit more crude than what we would otherwise expect. But this is the rendering showing what we've proposed, where we have a 7-foot wide sidewalk, and then there's essentially the open frontage from the townhomes onto Camino Ramon. And so what we would propose is that within the footprint, oh, that was too tall. Within the footprint, we would add essentially a waist-high metal fence, similar to what's being shown at this balcony at that ground floor, so that you have your front door, you have your porch, and then there's a fence within that porch line that then would not impact the landscaping, but it would provide privacy and then a barrier from people coming out of the front door. So they would go through the gate in order to access the
Great.
sidewalk.
Perfect drawing. Finger painting. It's great. And then you mentioned, I think the sidewalk would have to be shrunk a bit. How much would you have to shrink the sidewalk?
Yeah, so we need to study it a little bit
Okay.
more different. We just need to look through conflicts in terms of the meandering sidewalk. So making sure that we have clearances.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question on that topic. When I was looking at the drawing, the site plan, from the front door to the sidewalk, it seemed like there was a passageway of additional walkway from the front door to the sidewalk. Now, maybe that was just me looking at the plans with the non-architect's eye. See if I can find what page it was on. You know, I can. Hang on.
So I'm looking at page TM-4.
Okay.
If you look at the larger plan set.
Yeah, okay, there's 12, 9, 7, 4. Thank you.
And so along the frontage, there are essentially sidewalks connecting the front doors to that meandering sidewalk.
Do you know what the expected distance is on that walkway?
The length of the walkway is going to vary because the sidewalk is meandering.
Right.
I do have the civil who,
Well, part why I'm asking is I'm looking at this photograph or this rendering where the sidewalk is right next to the front door, but on these plans, it looks like there's the front door, a little bit of walkway, and then the city walk sidewalk, or, you know, this walking district sidewalk. I'm just wondering what that distance is. And it's okay if you don't know. I mean,
again, it varies from
Okay.
unit to unit because that sidewalk is
Sure.
not rectilinear.
Right.
And so some of them have the sidewalk right up against that front porch, whereas some are a little bit further.
Yeah.
If-
but there is a separation between the meandering trail, the meandering sidewalk, and the front doors porch.
Yes, and
Okay.
there's another page. If you go to landscape L 1.4,
6. Thank you. Okay.
there's a cross section showing ranges of dimensions.
Mhm.
And so it's showing from that front building facade
Okay.
to the meandering sidewalk, there's a range of 7 to 12.5 feet for the area that was drawn. So it's going to range from essentially a foot or two to about 12.5 feet as it winds along Camino Ramon.
Okay. Does that then sort of negate the impact of reducing the meandering sidewalk?
So again, we need to coordinate for different units what that looks like. We would prefer to not have a 7-foot sidewalk go to a 5-foot sidewalk, go to a 6-foot sidewalk. So
No, the question is if the landscape area can be the part that, you know, widens and diminishes.
what we're trying to maintain is the width that's required for those larger shade trees along Camino Ramon. And then we also, on the other side of the sidewalk, need to maintain dimensions for utilities.
Okay.
So we're trying to balance shade trees, utilities, stormwater for Camino Ramon, but we'll balance kind of have the sidewalk be as large as possible while minimizing those conflicts with the proposed.
That's an excellent answer. Thank you. It's very informative. Appreciate that. Other questions, gentlemen? Okay, go ahead. Commissioner Wallace?
I'm going to start off by asking a question, staff. On September 19th, a special meeting of the ARB was noticed for the BR7 development. Why was it a special meeting?
Yeah, the scheduling conflicts with ARB members.
Okay. The second question was, once the meeting had been scheduled for the 26th, the staff then released a notice on September 25th that the project, I can't remember if it's complete or met city standards, one of the two. It seems that by sending out the notice the day before the AR meeting, it reduced the number of HAA meetings that were available to the Planning Commission by 1. And why was that notice sent out the day before the AR meeting as opposed to the day after?
Because we have an obligation to deem projects complete within 30 days.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
We have an obligation to deem projects complete within 30 days of submittals.
Okay, and that's what it was for?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think that's right, but okay. I don't think that's right. Question. I will go back to the applicant. Your report refers to what are called mews. That sounds like a cat noise, but it's spelled M-E-W-S. What exactly is a mew?
So it's the area between the townhomes. If we look towards this townhome on the left, you're looking at essentially a shared sidewalk with front doors that are facing each other with landscaping. And so that's generally referred to as a mew.
That's yeah, Paseo probably
a
would be
paseo.
a little bit more apt.
We will accept Paseo as a synonym.
That's fine. Question. How wide is the mew between the townhomes?
So from the closest building face to building face is 20 feet.
Okay.
And then there are setbacks for the front doors, which are a little bit further behind.
Okay, so it looks from the drawing that's in front of us that there would be at least some type of landscaping between the townhomes?
Landscaping in terms of in the front of the homes?
Well, yes, in front of the homes.
Yes.
Okay, so is there any have you thought about putting things like benches or tables out that would encourage people to get outside and talk to their neighbors?
The site plan currently does not contemplate benches or tables within this area.
Okay. I believe that when you were doing your drawing on the slide up there, I think that was in reference to comments that were made at our study session that there was concern about the townhomes that were facing Camino Ramon, that the occupants' children, particularly small children, might be able to sort of dart out from the townhomes into the street. And I assume that what you were describing to the commissioners was a way of preventing that, the fence you were talking about.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I appreciate your dealing with that subject because we've had several projects where that particular issue had come up. So the traffic study. Now, I understand the concept that it is more likely that a residential development will have less traffic in and out than an office building, which is what BR7 currently is. But I haven't seen in our packet either the housing study or an executive summary that supports that. Do we have something like that that can be shared?
It's part of staff's administrative file, but yes, we have a full traffic study for VMT as well as peak trip demand.
Okay. Does that study contain what would be considered an executive summary?
I'd have to go back and look, but the traffic study was reviewed by the city traffic engineer and deemed to be acceptable.
Okay. I know our traffic engineer is out there. Hi there. Does the report have an executive summary? All right. All right. The reason I ask is making a finding on a traffic study we haven't seen is a little bit awkward. So that's why I brought it up. I think an executive summary would be a reasonable substitute for a 250-page traffic study. So I want to put that out there. There is a series of pages beginning around packet page 60 that appear to be mitigation measures that are affiliated with the EIR for the, I think it's for the general plan. And what I wanted to ask about was the portions of packet pages 62 and 63, which talk about roadway noise. And in part, they talk about sound walls being constructed along Camino Ramon from Norris Canyon to Bollinger, which is actually part of the area that BR7 occupies. What is anticipated to be done to reduce roadway noise in the vicinity of BR7? They talk about sound walls, they talk about special roadway paving, that's all on packet pages 62 and 63. So I would like to know what exactly is planned, or at least contemplated for that.
Let me catch up for a second here.
Sure. For example, let me just read into the record one of the questions I had. This is on packet page 64. It's mitigation measure B as in Baker. And the subheading is special roadway paving. It says, quote, "The city shall install quiet pavement roadway improvements such as rubberized asphalt or open grade asphalt concrete overlays along impacted roadway segments," and identifies that Camino Ramon between Norris Canyon Road and Bollinger Canyon, where sound barriers are determined not to be feasible. Now, the area that I described, Camino Ramon from Norris to Bollinger, is where BR7 is located. So given that, I was wondering what the plan is for installing either A, the special roadway paving, or B, sound walls.
So there's several issues that are in play with this particular mitigation. The first is we have a standard that relates to sensitive receptors in habitable spaces. And so as part of the requirements, we do require that the design of the structure be, or the design of the walls, windows, it be soundproof to the point of minimizing the impact to, I think it's 25 decibels, or excuse me, I think it's 45 decibels with the interior noise level. So if the project meets that requirement, there would be no impact related to this. Now, you mentioned the noise reducing pavement. That's actually a city requirement. Should we determine that there's an ambient noise level associated with it? So there's really two things that we're talking about. One is the impact related to the project specifically, and then the other is related to the community as a whole, which is a city obligation. The value of a sound wall might be necessary if they're unable to attenuate the noise impact based on these structural modifications.
Okay, so
make sense?
I think if I can summarize what you just said, that as long as the construction of the buildings reduces the sound inside the structure to 45 decibels or less, then you're not going to need mitigation objectives such as sound walls and the like
At this time.
at this
right,
time.
Right. And so, again, sound wall doesn't necessarily solve a problem for a second story issue or anything like that. And then when you get beyond the initial row of houses, the buildings themselves are noise attenuation.
Right.
But when you get into a condition where there's road volumes that are high enough to create noise levels, which I don't believe Camino Ramon meets that requirement, but it's something that will be studied over time. And again, paving techniques are one way of reducing it, as well as future projects, sound walls, and that would be a city obligation at that point.
So are I'm going to refer to them as studies, that may be a euphemistic term, but are these types of studies something that's done as a matter of course during the development of a project of this size? In other words, it will be done and then a decision made where they need to do something more?
Well, yes, as part
Okay.
of the building permit review process, we will have a study that goes into the record that shows that they're meeting the sound standards, the internal sound standards for the property. The issues regarding the roads is a totally separate issue that's more of a CIP and long-term improvement plan kind of thing.
Oh, when we get all the money from the new property tax, sales tax, yeah, okay.
Not sure that will do it. So.
Got it. Okay, let's go back to the applicant. I know you feel kind of left out there on the lectern. It looks to me on packet TM3, I was giving you that as an example, that there is 3 entrances to the development. One in Camino Ramon at Street A, one in Executive Parkway at Street C, and if I'm reading it right, there's an entrance on Street B as well.
So I would like to clarify that.
Yeah.
The location at Street C is for emergency vehicle access
Okay.
only.
Okay. So to get the other two right?
You did get the other two.
Okay. Are any of those entrances, I assume they're egress and ingress?
Yes.
Are any of them signal lights? Is there? Okay.
No. No signals.
No, I'm sorry?
No signals.
Okay. And I assume our city traffic engineer has looked at that and given it her blessing. Yes, heads going up and down, yes, okay. Let the record show she said yes. Thank you. I assume that a homeowners association will be set up to manage, among other things, the streets?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all the questions I had at this point.
Right. Any other questions? Clarifying staff, applicant? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I believe that the protocol is for me to open, if I can find my paperwork, sorry, open for public hearing,
Public comment.
public comment. That's right. Just a moment. There we go.
I have no speaker cards, but we received written public comment from Stephanie Hill, a letter from the Peter Ziblatt Law Group, and Dylan Casey and James Lloyd with Cal HDF.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so since seeing no speaker cards and acknowledging our written comments, we will close public comments. And now to discuss. So before we get to the resolution and or conditions of approval, gentlemen, where do you initially fall on the issue of sidewalk versus small gates on the front doors or the front porches for the townhomes on Camino Ramon?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So we've been asked here to weigh in as to whether we recommend that they add the fencing on those front doors for the townhome residents on Camino Ramon or not, as a trade-off with the width of the sidewalk, as best they could maintain that. And I just trying to see where we individually are leaning on that particular topic.
So how much of the sidewalk are we giving up by having a fence? About a foot?
1 to 2 feet is I believe
Okay,
okay. Yeah. 1 to 2. Mhm.
okay.
So if I understand correctly, 5 is what's required. They were penciling it out to be 7, but to accommodate now all along Camino Ramon, that one section for those front door gates at fencing, that would be reduced to 5, likely to 5 foot, or no less than 5 feet.
Okay,
Back to the city standards.
okay,
Does
well,
that make sense?
I think I understand that. And
Okay.
one question I did not ask about the fence is it a lockable or closable fence?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay, all right. So it seems to me the issue is by doing that, you have some additional security for the residents of those units to prevent the thing that was discussed at our meeting, which was a small child darting out into the street because the front door was unlocked and there was nothing to keep that person from going out of the street. I know at certain times they've talked about bushes and stuff like that, but in terms of in the front door, that doesn't seem to be a likely arrangement. So that's the trade-off. So I guess the question is, I'm not a hiker, but is a 5-foot sidewalk that might result from placing the fence in play, is that adequate for at least one person, it clearly is. What about two to pass by each other?
In my experience, it is a little, well, it's certainly doable. I like to walk shoulder to shoulder with my partner. If we have the dog, it gets a little more crowded. But if you're just passing, that's certainly doable. And so just as a point of reference, there are 34 front doors on Camino Ramon. That's what we're talking about here. So it's not an accommodation for the entire development.
No.
It's simply those individual units. And I would say, having watched our little grand dog, the dog is as likely to run out.
If not more so.
Yes, yes, than some small children. But we've all, anybody who's had children knows what that moment of panic is when they're just out of your reach.
Well, let me ask a question again. I realize the applicant's already sat down, but let me ask this question. From the rendering that you did that put the fence in the picture, there was landscaping between the curb and the sidewalk. Is it possible, therefore, if we put the fencing in, to shrink the landscaping down to pick up the extra foot or two of sidewalk?
That was my question about, they have the access and some utilities and things like that.
Oh, not the sewer district, I guess. No. Okay. Okay.
Sewers are back.
All right.
Okay. Thoughts?
I mean,
I-
I think, oh, go ahead.
No. I've done all the talking
I was
already.
just gonna say, I think the value of safety over a 2-foot barrier on a sidewalk is highly more important for the community. So I would say put the fencing in. I guess the question then is, what about the park area, which is also on Camino Ramon? Is there any type of barrier for that, or does that go right to the street? The little
Bartlett.
greenway area here on Camino Ramon?
Oh,
That's what I'm trying to figure out then, because
I think-
if you're thinking of safety from there,
I think that the part of what you're describing as the park on Camino Ramon is actually a bioswale. And I know that in the applicant's comments in response to ARB's comments, what they indicated was that at least they were not planning, and it might not even be feasible to allow pedestrian use of the bioswales. Am I right? So that's,
yeah, but stop your kid. All right, yeah, but I still think the fencing is more important than the sidewalk.
Commissioner Alpert? It's okay if you don't have a preference.
I do not.
Okay?
on this one, I think I tend to agree with Commissioner Curtis. Safety is, I know it might be inconvenient for people walking along the street to do single file or something similar to that, or to get real cozy with each other. But I think that with 34 townhomes that you mentioned, I would suspect that those are likely to be the ones with the younger children. So I think that safety, I think, is a little more important than the walking area. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And I think that I like the idea that for the balconies above, and you kind of echo a similar kind of treatment, aesthetically, it would be attractive and just, a place that the bicycle can be behind something, as they get older, or the carriage, depending on the age bracket. That would be my preference as well. And I know you were interested in hearing. So it sounds like we have 3 that are leaning in that direction and 1 that is impartial. So is that helpful? Okay. So do we want to go to resolutions? Are we prepared to consider the resolutions? And go ahead, Ms. Barr.
Two topics. One, I just wanted to point out a couple of corrections in the conditions of approval. The last condition related to police services and that the trees and shrubs should not block the light sources. was misnumbered. It should be 81 instead of 65. And then also there is a reference in condition number 42 to Dublin San Ramon Services District, which is not applicable. So we would strike that
Okay.
out in this particular case. And then lastly, just in a response to Commissioner Wallace's question about the traffic information, there is a discussion in the CEQA analysis that talks about the trip generation and VMT numbers being reduced from the existing condition by approximately 1,500 trips, and then also 1,500 plus in VMT. So it is in the staff report summary under CEQA.
No, I understand that it was mentioned in the staff report. I remember reading that, but as I said, what I didn't see is documentation of that through like an executive summary. But since our traffic engineer has vouched for the plan, it's part of the public record, I think I can be comfortable with her vouching for it, so.
All right.
Keep those numbers here, please.
Let me give you the specifics here. Hold on a second. Unfortunately messed up my page numbering here. The CEQA section, it's toward the beginning of the report.
I think it's mentioned on packet page 10, the fourth or fifth paragraph down talks about a transportation assessment screening analysis done by Gibson. And that's where the 1,518 daily trips was discussed, the net reduction of 15,132 daily VMT. That's in that part of the packet. Okay.
Oh. I can tell you packet page, package page. Mine's cut off.
Yeah.
The police one's packet page 45. The last page 11 is 11.
That's,
45. Okay.
it looks like maybe 40.
Oh, yeah.
40. It's condition number 42.
Okay. Staff, can you help me out here? Do we need a resolution first before we go through or do we have a motion before we go through the resolution? Or, okay. So we have been asked to consider adopting the resolution. So gentlemen,
Okay, I'll move to adopt resolution number 1124, resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Ramon approving the development plan DP 2024-0003, architectural review 20248-0006, major subdivision 2004-0002, tree removal permit, and environmental review for the Bartlett Pear BR7 residential development project located on approximately 12.64 acre parcel on Bishop Branch 7 as amended tonight at the dais.
Okay, I have a question. And that is, by making the resolution, we just opening up a discussion of the resolution and conditions of approval as opposed to stamping it approved? Okay, everybody's shaking their head up and down, so I'm assuming that's yes. Okay.
yeah, I did it wrong last time. So. Right. Okay. So are we seconding?
I will second.
Okay. Now, gentlemen, questions about the actual resolution? Discussion of. Okay.
Oh, if I could make a suggestion, generally, we go through them page by page. The resolution is only 11 pages. So hopefully it would be not onerous to do that.
Okay, I'm not, we're here. All right, so now I will say that I'm starting on packet page 24. And on my copy, there is no page number, but we're good. Okay? So starting on packet page 24, all the whereases. Any objection to the language there? Any clarifications? No? Seeing,
know.
hearing none? Next page. Okay. I think we got the dates there. Seeing any, hearing no objections to the second page, back at page 25. All right, going on to the next one. Okay. I think we're okay. All right. Talks about the mitigation. All right. Commissioner Wallace, we're good here. Next page, page 27, packet page 27. Okay. All right. So be it resolved. All right, so we're good. Next page. Packet page 28.
Okay, so packet page 28. I'm going to have some comments in a couple of these pages. They more or less devolve around the same issue, but let's start with paragraph 2B.
B as in David.
B as in
Oh,
Baker.
B as in boy. Okay.
Now, when I printed this out, it doesn't print out the same way as your packet is, I think. So what I'm going to do is to read you basically where I'm picking up and the change I'm going to make, and I'll explain why. It's not earth-shaking, but I think it needs to be done. There's a sentence on your packet. It's the third from the bottom of packet page 28 that says, including 118 multifamily homes and 72 single-family. The end of the next line where it says the proposed density bonus, it reads the proposed density bonus concession and waivers. There are no concessions that are being asked in this project. There is one waiver and there is one request regarding parking standards. That is neither a request nor a waiver. So I would strike the words concession and waivers and just put in the word waiver, which is consistent with what the applicant has asked for. And after the word waiver, I would put this language in. That is discussed infra, which is a fancy Latin way of saying thereafter. And I'm going to explain why. The point, a waiver is not something that just exists. It has to be granted by the city. A request is made by the applicant, but until it's granted by the city, it's not alive. And I think the resolution is the appropriate place to grant waivers. It's particularly simple in this case because there's only one waiver being asked for, and that's to have a FAR that doesn't meet our city requirements. But I'm going to propose later on that we explicitly state that we are granting the waiver that's requested by the applicant. So when we talk about waivers and/or concessions earlier in the resolution, I want to reference the fact that it's going to come up later, and that's why I proposed that language. That's the only change I had for packet page 28.
Okay, very good. Packet page 29.
Packet page 29, subparagraph C, I proposed the same language starting on the fourth line of subpart C. So it would read, including proposed state density bonus waiver, taking out the word concession and, because there's only a waiver being asked for, discussed infra. That's what I proposed to put in there.
Page 30.
On packet page 30, the last two sentences of what would be part 3B refers to our favorite subject of growth management element in our plan. I think that we should take out the words starting with including the performance guidelines all the way through the end of that sentence, in part because it's actually covered completely in part 7 of the resolution. So it's really redundant in this place here.
Through the chair, what was that packet page again?
Page 30, the very top, second line at the very top. After the line where it says city subdivision ordinance and
Yeah.
municipal code, comma.
Just skipping ahead a little bit, if you go to package page 32, item number 7 is entitled regarding growth management plan hyphen performance guidelines. So it's in at that point. I do not think it needs to be mentioned twice.
Yes. So this is the edit as I have indicated. On packet page 30, the first line says, close parentheses in the word law, and then it says, and the city's subdivision ordinance and municipal code. It would be period, and then the rest of the sentence would be stricken. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. Packet page next.
No,
31.
I'm still on
Go ahead.
packet 30.
Go ahead.
Okay, under item 4C, we've described elsewhere in the resolution referring to the BR7 housing project as the project. The first line, I say the projects, that's apostrophe S. But the second line is where I think we should make a change. The applicant has asked for, well, the applicant has proposed a allocation between the various housing income categories to trigger the density bonus availability. That is actually allowed under section C4 177A, capital A, of the inclusionary housing ordinance, where it speaks of that the applicant has to provide certain levels for very low income, and moderate. But then on both the single-family homes and the multifamily homes, there is a line that says the applicant can propose a different allocation. And that's exactly what the applicant has done here, proposing a different allocation than that in our zoning, in our inclusionary housing ordinance. What's in there now, section C4-79, is a different issue. That involves where the applicant is not proposing to provide on-site affordable units that comply with the inclusionary housing ordinance, but some other means of meeting that standard. So I think this should be C4-177 capital A instead.
Just a point of clarification. The 177 is the breakdown of affordable units by the percentages. And in this case, the applicant has shifted units to the very low, in which case the other standard is not being met. So the moderate, or in this case, the low, there's a lesser percentage of those that have then been pushed over to the very low income. Therefore, it's going under alternative compliance, which is the 179E, because it's a different unit breakdown.
Hang on one second. The sentence I was referring to in 177A is as follows, quote, "The applicant is not precluded from increasing the level of affordability in the project," close quote. Now, as I read that, it's how you shift the allocations among the various income brackets. Is it your view that what I just read actually doesn't relate to that subject, but the total percentage of units that are allocated to affordable units?
The argument, and it's a point of interpretation, is that because the units have gone from the low income category to very low, yes, we've increased the amount of affordability of very low, but we've reduced the number of low. So the net total units is the same,
Yeah.
but the breakdown is different. You can argue that the affordability has been increased, but you could also argue that the minimum percentage of the low income has not been met in this case. That's why the alternative compliance is being considered. Now, again, it's subject to interpretation, but we're taking a conservative approach.
Okay, well, as a matter of interpretation, the section that you're referring to, C4-179, talks about methods of alternative compliance. First one is voluntary provision of rental units. That doesn't apply. The second is off-site development, which at this point, it doesn't apply. The third is preservation of affordable units at risk of loss. D is land dedication, which again doesn't apply at this time for this project. And then E, catch-all, which is the review authority may accept any combination of on-site construction, off-site construction, affordable housing fees, and land dedication, or any other feasible alternative. Now, I find it a little hard to match that in what they're proposing to do here. Let me ask you this question. Does it really matter for purposes of our resolution which section we cite to?
Probably not.
Okay. So to humor me, can we use 177?
I'm fine with that.
All right, thank you.
C4-177A. Excellent.
Hang
Good
on a
work.
second. Now, what subsection C refers to is our city's inclusionary housing ordinance. But there's another statute at play here, which is the state density bonus law, which really isn't addressed in subparagraph C. Now, my suggestion would be to add the following language either as a separate, or you can just append it to what we already have. And it would say something along this line. The project's affordable housing proposal qualifies the project for a density bonus under Government Code Section 65915B1B, as 5% of the total units of the project will be for sale to very low income households as defined in Section 50105 of the Health and Safety Code. Said bonus consisting of 1 concession per Government Code Section D2A, and 2 waivers of development standards per Government Code Section C1. Now, I said qualifies for as opposed to the applicant asking for, because the 5% bogey qualifies them for a concession or waiver, but they're not using the concession. But what I wanted to put in here was that what they've done qualifies under the state density bonus law, not simply meets our inclusionary housing ordinance, because the inclusionary housing ordinance doesn't give rise to waivers or concessions. You follow my thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's implied under D that it's there, but you want it to be more explicit in stating that. That's fine.
Okay, yeah. And what I would, if we put the language in that I've suggested, we don't need D. We don't need D. Now, to go down on subparagraph F, as I said, the reason I talked about waivers and concessions earlier in the resolution is I want to put explicitly in the resolution that we are granting a concession that's been requested by the applicant. And what I propose to say in F is as follows. Application of the minimum site-wide FAR of 1.25 in DMU-N would make construction of the proposed project physically infeasible. So the project is therefore granted a waiver from that requirement pursuant to Government Code Section 65915C1. I think that's it. So I wanted to make it clear, first of all, that we were granting the waiver and perhaps more importantly, exactly what the waiver is, because under both the density law and our inclusionary housing ordinance, I think, or our state density or city bonus, you have to be specific as to what the waiver is. And this is pretty simple in this case. They want to have the FAR waived. So I wanted to be explicit that that's what's happening.
Are we okay with adding the word granted?
Again, it's really sort of a moot point at this, because the density bonus based on consistency findings has already been addressed, but again, it's a true statement, so.
Okay, thank you. Moving on.
Okay, now in subparagraph G, are we on? I
And
think,
we're on G.
okay. What they've asked for is a reduction in parking standards, not as a waiver or a concession, but the government housing accountability density bonus law allows for a reduction in housing standards. So what I would propose to say is that Government Code Section 65915 P1 establishes maximum parking standards for residential developments that qualify for a density bonus under Government Code Section 65915. The project has requested approval of its plan for 436 parking spaces on site that exceeds the 419 spaces permitted under Government Code Section 65915P1, and that request is hereby granted. Again, I think it's important to be explicit about what we're granting the applicant. In this case, it's the reduction in parking spaces.
Just to be clear, I don't think it's the commission's authority to grant it. State law has said they're entitled to that.
Okay,
And so it's not something that we have a choice in. They can ask for it and we're obligated to provide it.
okay. So to make the overlords in Sacramento County happy, can we say instead of granted, it would be some other, is approved, is not approved, or is established, something to show that this was considered by the commission. So the number of parking spaces they had has our blessing.
But the commission has no discretion over that point. They're granted the parking reduction by state law, so I don't see the
Okay,
need to
so-
modify that section of the.
Okay,
resolution.
so what it sounds like we're not saying that it's not wrong to discuss the parking reduction. It's a way how you phrase it. It's mandated by state law, something to that effect?
Well, the way the text is written, it says, it talks about it being established and the project being eligible for it. And so, and the fact that they're actually exceeding the minimum or the maximum that we can require is positive. And so, again, I don't know that you need to revise it at all, but again, that's for the commission to weigh in on.
I would just leaving it as written. It has
Excuse-
been, I was just leaving it as written. That's the.
We can
desire of
leave
the
that one.
commission.
Are we okay with leaving that one?
I think I can live with that.
There we go.
Okay.
Look at us. Okay, packet page 31. Architectural review recitals. I think we're all good here. Okay. Moving on. Packet page 32. Okay, tree removal. Okay, they're all going. Okay. Growth management, I think those are all fine. I'm on page next, which is 33. Okay, no net findings. I think we're all good with that. All right, seeing no objections. Getting down to back of page 34. Therefore, we're resolving. Yes? Okay, excellent. All right, conditions of approval.
Through the chair, given that the commission has opted for a fencing option, as opposed, it appears that the commission.
Yes.
We may want to add that language into condition 1 with the amendment to add fencing along the frontages of the,
Are you,
not-
do you have some language you might? I mean,
let me try again.
okay,
We could go at the end of the as approved by planning commission.
oh, okay.
This is condition number 1, as approved by planning commission on December 17th, 2004, with the addition of minimum of 3-foot fencing for the patios along Camino Ramon.
And while maintaining the minimum 5 feet wide sidewalk as required. Something to that effect, but sidewalk width should be in there too.
But, yeah.
Are we calling them patios or porches? Does it matter? Entrances? Yeah. The front door pad. Right. Okay. I trust you will have better language than what I just jotted. So thank you. Excellent. Okay, anything else on that, the first 1 through 4 here of conditions of approval? Turning the page. Anything in conditions 5 through 9? I think these pretty much are very similar to all the ones you generally see. Okay. Items 10 through 14,
I had an issue with number 10.
and it is.
Okay, so the first sentence says, quote, "The applicant's project description and affordable housing plan dated November 15, 2024 outlines an alternative offsite affordable housing concept, which is subject to approval of a general plan amendment, which is currently under review, period." Okay, that to me sounds like the concept for a plan. It's not a proposal. It's a hypothetical, it's speculation. It has no place in the conditions of approval because they're not asking for anything in this yet. So I think under any circumstances that needs to be taken out. The second problem I have with the rest of that paragraph is, quote, "Any changes to the affordable housing concept associated with this approval will require subsequent modifications of this approval, period. The zoning administrator shall determine the appropriate review authority for any revision or modification of the project approvals, period. Absent a formal request for modification of the project affordable housing component, the obligation shall be for construction of affordable housing units on-site consistent with this approval, period," close quote. The problem I have is that the inclusionary housing ordinance designates the review authority for the project as the person who decides modifications to the affordable housing component of it. The review authority for this project is the Planning Commission, not the zoning administrator. My suggestion is that we just take out paragraph 10. And then we will, if there is a proposal that is made sometime in the future, and as you can see from what I read, it's contingent upon a number of different things, including a general plan amendment, which requires not only a supermajority of the Planning Commission, but also a supermajority of the City Council. I do not think at this time we have any business talking about what might happen in the future. So I propose we just strike paragraph 10, period.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sure we will.
Okay. That was easy. All right. Items 11 through 14. Okay, moving on. All right. 15 to 23.
It may or may not be appropriate at this point to make a comment, but since we're talking about these things here, our inclusionary housing ordinance, when it was really drafted the last go-around, talked about affordable units of both multifamily and single family. What it didn't discuss was if you have if you have both product types in the same project, what happens? And I do want to thank the applicant for dealing with this issue by having the affordable units dispersed throughout the project, meaning they were in both product types, as our inclusionary ordinance requires. I just wanted to note that this is the first time, I believe, that we have faced this, because the other two projects, City Village and Iron Horse Village, they came up when the inclusionary housing ordinance that now exists was not in effect. And so, for example, Iron Horse Village, all the affordable units were put in the townhomes because at that time, single-family homes were not subject to the inclusion housing ordinance. So this is sui generis. This is the first time this has come up. I think that the resolution that the applicant made here is the appropriate one. And I just wanted to say, I want to thank you for dealing with it in that way.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to turn the page. Items number 24 through 30. Hearing no complaints. All right, 31 to 40. Okay, excellent. Now we're getting to these ones that, okay, I circled number 42.
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that there was a request that we eliminate Dublin San Ramon Services District.
Okay.
Okay. Not that we eliminate the district, but we take it out of the conditions of approval.
Got it. Okay. All right, turning page. 53 to 61, gentlemen. All right. Seeing no disagreement. Okay. 62 through 68. Okay, those seem pretty standard. 69 to 74. I believe these are all, again, these are standard conditions of approval. 75 to 80, and then the one last little.
What is currently number 65 should be renumbered 81.
Yes. Okay. I got that straight now. All right. Excellent. We have made it to the end. So we are given the modifications as we've discussed and agreed to, and we do have a motion, and it has been seconded. I believe we're ready to vote. Do I need to
Yep.
read it again?
Just for the record, what's being voted on is the resolution as amended on the dais, correct? Okay.
Yes. Thank you for the
And the
correction.
conditions of approval.
Okay. And
And conditions of approval, ditto.
as we have modified and or adjusted. Okay, very good. Why did you hear somebody's making a noise?
know.
I feel slighted. I don't get a bell. All right, gentlemen, this has passed 4-0. The motion is approved. So thank you very much.
I'd like to just say,
go ahead.
thank the applicant for three things in particular. The Iron Horse connection, I think you listened very carefully and you appreciate it, and we do too. The shared parking, that was really a nice add to this project, so thank you for that. And then third, the flexibility to listen on the gates or fences or whatever it is, but it doesn't go unnoticed. So thank you very much for being responsive to our request. I appreciate that.
I will second those sentiments that this has been a very, you've showed great responsiveness to our concerns and took them very seriously and so willing to work with things we were hoping to make sure that those homeowners get the product that we all want them to have. So thank you again. It's been really important for me too. And I didn't even mention the trees. So it's all good. Okay. All right. I believe we're going to item 9.2, if I can find my outline here, which is public hearing, the time extension for Windflower Fields Townhome Development. And we are hearing from Mr. Barr. Thank you.
Okay, once again, I'll provide an overview and then there's a representative from the project proponents here as well. So on December 7th, 2021, the city approved vesting tentative map and related applications for a 47-unit for sale multifamily residential project. It also included 16 accessory dwelling units on a parcel located at 2701 Hooper Drive, otherwise referred to as Golden Skate. While the applicant has done some initial work in pursuing approvals, they've been delayed by a landslide on the adjacent property that is now impacting this particular site. In accordance with the municipal code, approval of tentative maps, vesting tentative maps expire 36 months from the approval date, which set the expiration date as December 7th, 2024. On November 13th, the applicant filed for a time extension request asking for 72 months under the Subdivision Map Act. Staff is actually recommending a extension of 18 months to allow the applicant additional time to work out the compliance issues with the landslide and pursue their project. Should they need an additional extension in the future, they can always come back before the body and extend and show their progress to date. The selection of the 18 months is also consistent with the intent of AB 2729 that goes into effect January, that had this project not expired prior to January 1st would have automatically extended it for 18 months. And so if the commission approves this current extension, that'll essentially take the place of the extension under state law. And so they will still be eligible for additional extensions under the Subdivision Map Act that exists today. Ultimately, the Planning Commission has some discretion to approve or deny the project, but staff recommends that the commission consider the staff report and attachments, open the public hearing, and take public testimony, close the hearing, discuss, and if appropriate, approve resolution 12-24 approving an 18-month time extension for the entitlements and conditions of approval. And there's a draft resolution, very simple resolution that just references back to the prior approvals.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if the applicant's representative would like to say a few words about their request.
Good evening, pardon me. Good evening, commissioners, staff. Thank you. Brian Winter from Miller Star Regalia on behalf of the applicant. I don't want to belabor this or overly complicate what I think is a simple issue. I'm happy to answer any questions. We did provide a letter today. I appreciate staff recommending an 18-month extension. That certainly is allowed and in fact required by Government Code Section 66452.6E, which is the Subdivision Map Act extension statute, which provides for up to a 6-year extension after, if a timely extension request is filed before the expiration of the underlying tentative map, which is the case here. The Map Act doesn't compel 6 years all out of the gate, but state law does confirm that it's court law, case law confirms that the extension is not discretionary. The discretion of a planning commission or a decision-making body with respect to a map is in connection with approving or disapproving the map in the first instance. When an extension request is filed, the discretion is limited to the length of the extension, not to the question of whether to give an extension or attempt to make any findings for disapproval of the previously approved project. So 18 months is fine with us. We would love to have 6 years to not have to repeat this. I had a project recently in Antioch. We got a year extension a year ago, and we came back this year and we had to extend again, and we got 5 years to not have to come back year after year. We don't want to come back year after year, but 18 months is fine with us. So we disagree with the characterization in the staff report that this is something that can be disapproved. It cannot be disapproved. In addition, the staff report seems to suggest or state that the vesting of this project, the vested rights of this project are somehow in play such that the project could be subjected to changes in general plan, specific plan or zoning standards and criteria. That also is not true. This project was the subject of a preliminary application filed in the fall of 2020 that locked in the rules in effect at that point. It also, of course, is the subject of a vesting tentative map, which has its own vesting, and the vesting under a vesting tentative map, it goes back once that project is approved, as is the case of this project. The vesting goes back to the point in time when the project application was deemed complete, and that project vests into the rules, the ordinances, policies, and standards that are in effect at the time the application is deemed complete. And when this was deemed complete, again, the vesting was accomplished through SB 330, locking in the rules in effect in fall of 2020. But with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope it's no issue to grant the 18-month extension here, and I hope we don't have to come back and seek a further extension.
You have questions?
Thank you.
Whoop, 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 whoop. No, gotta earn your
Just a-
feet. I have a question since you brought this up. The staff report cited a section of the Housing Accountability Act, which is Government Code Section 65589.5P, as in Paul. In that paragraph, 1 says the city, it says the extension, I think, shall not prohibit a housing development project from being subject to ordinances, policies, and standards adopted after the preliminary application was submitted pursuant to Section 65941.1 in the following circumstances, and D as in David says, quote, the housing development project has not commenced construction within 2.5 years, ... following the date that the project received final approval, period, close quote. So my question to you is, how does subsection P relate to the Subdivision Map Act extension?
The vesting that is accomplished in the preliminary, you got two statutes working together with a project that's using SB 330. You have 65941.1, which is a part of the government code enacted by SB 330, and you have Government Code Section 65589.5, which is the Housing Accountability Act, which was amended by SB 330. Those two things work together. 65941.1 is the preliminary application statute, which creates the automatic vested rights upon the filing of a preliminary application, and that ties to Government Code Section 65589.9 subsection O, which provides for the vesting as described in the HAA, and it provides the limited circumstances under which vesting would not occur, such as, for example, which is not relevant here, if a project changes the square footage of construction or the unit count by 20% or more. That's one of the exceptions, the limited exceptions to the vesting you get through these two statutes working in combination. The 2.5 years, which applies to a project like this, you have vesting from the time you file your preliminary application, if you timely file a formal application and you get it deemed complete, and from the time that you have final action on the project, you have 2.5 years after that point to commence construction of the project. That's vesting under SB 330 and the HAA. Separate vesting is accomplished here also through the fact that there's a vesting tentative subdivision map here, and that vesting, these work. They work together. And I know there's lots of moving parts, but they work together. To the extent that any vesting here accomplished through SB 330 expires or has expired because the project has not commenced construction with within 2.5 years, it's picked up by the vesting of the MAP Act, because the MAP Act provides that when the project is approved, you have vested rights with respect to the ordinances, policies, and standards that are in effect as of the date that application is deemed complete. Here again, this application was deemed complete under when SB 330 was fully in effect, when the project had vested rights under SB 330 and locked in the general plan, specific plan, zoning, et cetera, at that point in time. So the subdivision map act's vesting carries that forward for as long as we can keep the tentative map alive, which at this point is at least 6 more years. Hopefully that makes sense, but the map act carries forward what was achieved.
The subdivision Act is a safety valve if the construction
Well,
can't be done in 2.5 years.
In this case, I mean, you can have a project that filed the preliminary application under SB 330 that did not file a vesting map. There's reasons developers don't file vesting maps, in which case you could run the risk of losing that vesting. In this case, there was. In most cases, there is a vesting tentative map, and in that case, whatever you locked into under SB 330, even if that vesting, which is different, the vesting rules are a little bit different. Substantively, what's important here is the general plan, the specific plan, and the zoning were locked in at that point in time, and those are absolutely carried forward through the vesting tentative map.
No, I remember our discussion from whether this project was originally approved.
I go around the state making everyone happy.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So I have a question.
Sure.
To what extent are you familiar with the location?
Quite.
Okay, so I drove out there this morning to see if you could locate where the slide is, and there is that one area. It seems quite well. I'm not a geotechnician, but it does not seem that large, and it does not seem that is reasonably close to where this property is. Do you have a little more information on that landslide?
I can provide in this. I think Lauren, Deb, you might have some of the documentation. NGO is our geotechnical engineer. We have extensive documentation of the slide. It's a substantial slide. To directly remediate it, our understanding is that it could cost several $1 million for the upslope landowner who ultimately is responsible for it. I mean, to the extent that slide does come down and affect other properties, they will have liability. We're looking at trying to, given the difficulties of having that property owner address the scope of the issue that's on their property, we are trying to address things ourselves to allow this project to proceed. We've been in contract with a couple of different home builders, and right now we can't proceed until the slide is addressed either by them or by us through our own efforts. But that is a substantial slide. And I believe the city has some documentation already, and we can provide more.
Through the chair, I just add that the issues with the landslide are further complicated by the fault zone that is right through that edge.
Okay, got it. Do you anticipate?
No fault of theirs, though.
No fault of that.
Okay.
It's off their property.
Do you anticipate that this getting this resolved will have to find its way into the court system?
I hope not. I mean, that's nobody's. Yeah, well, that's nobody's goal. Well, again, we're trying right now to. We have solutions. We're identifying engineered solutions that would allow us to address circumstances on our own property to protect the property from that slide.
Mm-hmm.
That's one option. Another option is for that property, and of course, that property is meant to be at some point annexed into the city's GAD. At this point, that property owner is responsible for any issues their slide causes. If the slide is not addressed and it comes into the GAD, it will become the GAD's responsibility. But right now, we are looking at essentially self-help in a sense to try to do what we can do to allow our project to move forward by addressing the slide ourselves, but not fixing the issue on their own property, but protecting our own property from their slide.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to get a feel for this.
Yeah.
The amount of time, this time extension. So that's why I'm
nobody,
asking.
I can say, I mean, I've had to in numerous cases, applicants like this need to seek an extension of a subdivision map. It's very common. Nobody wants to be in that position. Everybody wants to go forward as quickly as possible. So prolonging the ability to complete the subdivision and build the project is not our objective. We want to go as quickly as possible.
Right. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you-
Commissioner
Um,
Albert?
Just because sometimes it becomes a question in my mind. When does the 18 months start and when does it end? Does it start tonight or does it start when the letter request was submitted?
It starts tonight.
Tonight, okay, or maybe tomorrow.
I believe there's a date in the special condition that talks about it extended for 18 months until June 7th, 2026.
Thank you. I apologize for missing that. And then the second question, and it's a combination of, in the staff report, under next steps, it says if no appeal by the end of the appeal period, December 27th. But then in the resolution, it talks about a 90-day period for appeal. Are these different
that-
appeals or?
It's different appeals. It's an appeal of fees related to
okay.
impact fees.
Oh, okay,
It's
thank you.
standard language we put in all of
I
them.
thought so, but I just was confused by the two dates. Thank you. Another question.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. This just, let's see, where am I? Sorry. Okay, open public, comments. Do we have any public comments on this item?
No speakers cards received, but we received written public comment from Brian Winter with Miller Star Regalia.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you. And we did get that prior to tonight's meeting. Okay, seeing no speaker cards, we'll close public comment on this topic. All right, gentlemen, we are now to the discuss and deliberate phase. Okay.
Let me start. I think this is a fairly straightforward request under the Subdivision Map Act. And I don't think we need to get much beyond that. I had a discussion with staff yesterday for at least half an hour that dealt with whether the state law, which will be basically nullified by an extension that we give today under the Subdivision Map Act, should even be mentioned in the resolution and conditions of approval. As I understand it, if we grant the extension under the Subdivision Map Act, there's a provision in the State Bill, Assembly Bill 2729 that says its 18-month extension doesn't apply. Got that right? All right. So basically, all we really need to say is the applicant has requested an extension under the Subdivision Map Act. We've granted an 18-month extension. We say that in the condition of approval and we're done. Anything that discusses the Bill 2729 is irrelevant to that decision. And there's language in here that, to me, makes it a little bit unclear as to which extension we're talking about, the Subdivision Map Act, which Mr. Winter talked about, or the 2729. So what I would propose, and I'm happy to go through the resolution and the condition, to basically remove the references to 2729 and make this an extension of 18 months under the Subdivision Map Act.
Hey, staff, I'm out of my wheelhouse here.
You want me to start? Okay. I think it's important to understand that the whereas statements and the findings are part of the record of decision that goes into why we're proceeding the way we are, and it helps staff in understanding in the future what happened in the past. And so part of this is to reference the fact that the legislation was a consideration, and we need to be very clear that because we're extending it now under the Subdivision Map Act, this other area is no longer applicable. And, again, I don't know that it makes any difference in the scheme of things to have this information for, future staff members and future property owners to understand what was happening at the time. Had this happened, had the extension not expired in June and expired in January, you wouldn't see this because by matter of law, it would have been extended without any action on the commission's part. So again, from a staff's perspective, I think we're comfortable leaving it as written. The city attorney's office has weighed in on it with us, and we've incorporated their recommendations in this process. And so, again, from staff perspective, we don't see the need to change anything.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, which is what we talked about for half an hour yesterday.
We can agree to disagree.
Yeah, it's just a professional, disagreement. There's nothing personal about it. I will say that the 2729 did not play any consideration for me in making a decision on the extension. The applicant came in and asked for an extension under the Subdivision Map Act because they had a landslide on their property caused by an adjacent landowner. That's the only thing that I considered in determining whether the extension should be granted. I didn't care about 2729 because what we're doing makes it a nullity. It didn't play any factor in my thinking. And I just think adding it just complicates things. It makes things harder. And, I think by saying, here's why we did it, which is the way I'd propose to have the resolution, we have given staff our reason for what we did, for whatever that's worth in a future extension request, or in this project or something else. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Is there a desire among our commissioners here to change the language or leave it as staff has written it? Okay.
I'm sorry, you got to speak up. I can't hear you.
Staff.
Okay, I think this is the bird in the hand. All right. So considering, do we have a motion to approve the resolution?
These titles are long, but I will
Yeah.
approve adoption of Resolution 1224, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Ramon approving an 18-month time extension for Windflower Fields Townhome Development and vesting tentative map 9572, DP 21300-003 and MJ 21-900-003 extension requests located at 2701 Hooper Drive, parcel number 208-250-091.
Okay, is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Excellent. Okay. All right, so let's go through. This is got 3 pages here. And other than Commissioner Wallace's objection or discussion of Assembly Bill 2729, do we have anything else that we want to consider amend? We're good? Okay. Turning the next page, page 3 of 3. Therefore, we are resolving to do the 18-month time extension. Okay. Conditions of approval. Page 1 of 1. Any objections? Any language modifications? Hearing none. Okay. Let's vote. All right, seeing the vote at 4-0, the motion has been approved. So thank you so much. Go forth and be fruitful. Okay, item next. All right, very good. We are now at item number 10, non-public hearing action items. There are none. Item 11, study session. Commissioner, okay. All right, so I know we have item 11.1 study session for the TA 2024 zoning ordinance update. Text amendment. That's what the TA was. Took me a moment there. Miss Yee, how are you?
Good, thank you. I
All
feel like
right.
it's been some time.
Happy holidays.
Happy
Yeah, I know.
holidays.
You've been busy at work.
Yes, so just a quick overview of the zoning ordinance text amendment. Tonight is the first study session on the zoning ordinance update. We anticipate that we'll have a number of these study sessions. We felt that it would be easier to digest in some of these smaller topical conversations, and so that we can capture your comments and then continue to take that feedback and refine and then bring back topics. And then once we gather all that feedback, we'll come back with a public hearing that will formalize the proposed text amendment and then move that forward to City Council review as well. So tonight, we're just here to receive some feedback on, as I mentioned, some topical areas of our zoning ordinance. Primarily, the text amendment is to address general plan and housing element policy that we had said we would implement. And so we are bringing back 3 topics tonight to discuss. The first topic of discussion is related to parking standards. As you'll recall, in our housing element, we made we identified Program 19 to amend parking standards related to a number of different types of uses, residential uses and supportive housing, and shelters and other types of parking as it relates to housing. Those areas that we're proposing to modify are identified in Table 3-8. It's a consideration of modifying the parking standards for multifamily, reducing the parking standard, which currently requires a 3rd parking space for any multifamily units that propose 4 bedrooms or greater, to just a 2 covered space maximum. For single family, the requirement would go to a maximum of 2 covered spaces within a garage. And then, and I should mention, those 2 standards were discussed extensively in the housing element. So you'll see some background information that's in the housing element related to that program. And then this 3rd modification that's being proposed came out of conversations that we've had on previous projects related to single-family guest parking. And currently, the city does not have a guest parking requirement for single-family residential developments. Throughout most of Saramone's residential development history, a lot of our single-family developments had your traditional driveway where potentially guests could park in that subdivision, along with public streets that were available for guest parking. The trend that we've seen recently with single-family development is reducing the driveway option and also going to private streets to provide different designs within that streetscape. And so one of the discussions that we've had in the past with the commission was regarding identifying a standard that we could apply to single-family developments that do not have that type of design with the public streets and the driveways. And so one of the recommendations is to identify an additional guest parking requirement on top of the minimum parkings for the home. And we would use the same parking standard for guest parking as we currently apply for multifamily. That seems to be working fairly well for our multifamily developments. And so we would recommend adding that requirement, not for existing single-family developments that already have been built, but any future new single-family developments that are designed without public streets and without driveways. The next standard that's proposed to be amended on the parking standards is related to supportive housing, and this is specifically just addressing a new state law that requires the city exempt parking requirements for supportive housing uses. And then the last parking standard that would be amended would be related to shelters, so homeless shelters or shelters for the unhoused. The city currently has a parking ratio, but it has a parking ratio not only for residents, but also employees and for bicycle parking. State law says that you can only require a parking standard for employees. You can't also assign an additional parking space for the beds that are in the shelter. And so we're just responding to state law, and that's also identified in our housing element program as one of the changes that we would make after the adoption of the housing element. The second topic for discussion this evening is related to land use tables. And the land use tables have not been comprehensively updated since 2012. So it's been over a decade since the city's really had a comprehensive look at all of our land use tables. One of the considerations with the general plan now with new zoning areas and removing the North Camino Ramon specific plan and other trends that we've seen with new types of businesses that are not currently defined in our zoning ordinance, needing to do a further evaluation of those tables. This is our attempt to take a comprehensive look at the land uses related to commercial areas and the mixed use areas and identify areas that can be updated as part of this process. And so attachment A identifies track changes to those land use tables, tables 2-6 and 2-8 specifically. Something just to highlight is that we have a manufacturing/warehouse zone and a service commercial zone that's currently still in our zoning ordinance. However, there's no actual zones that are identified in our zoning map that correlates to those two zones. And the reason for that is that when we adopted the North Camino Ramon specific plan years ago, that plan allowed for a continuation of MW and CS uses on an interim basis until the specific plan was implemented and sites were redeveloped that converted those older warehouse manufacturing uses to what the specific plan had identified. And so we've continued to maintain the MW and CS zones in the land use tables and in our zoning ordinance. Now, due to the sunsetting of the North Camino Ramon specific plan with the general plan adoption, there's now a need to delete the MW and CS zones because there is no interim provisions in the North Camino Ramon specific plan anymore. And so our recommendation is to delete those sections out of the table and then references within the zoning ordinance to the MW and the CS zone. And so you'll see a crossing out of that of that text in the tables. But one of the uses that we do need to consider finding a new location for or new zone for is adult businesses. And so adult businesses have always been identified by the city as an allowed use through a use permit in the MW zone. Now, with the deletion of the MW zone, we'll need to find a new zone. What we replaced with a lot of the MW locations either were previously or is now currently either mixed commercial or mixed use zones. And so what the alternatives that we've identified in our zoning ordinance could potentially be mixed commercial or thoroughfare commercial, but those zones are required to have certain setback distances per our standards for adult businesses. And so staff is making a recommendation to replace the MW zone with the mixed commercial zone. There's two areas in the city where mixed commercial currently exists. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the area adjacent to the freeway on San Ramon Valley Boulevard in that red color, kind of almost burnt orange color is a mixed commercial zone. And then the other area is at the city limits with Danville on Fostoria and Camino Ramon. So those are the two areas. And the primary reason for this particular zone is it's a non-residential zone. But adult businesses are required to be established with certain minimum radiuses. Any of the other zones that exist in the city that are non-residential zones have a difficulty meeting the 500-foot radius. And so, for example, the thoroughfare commercial is too close in proximity to residential zones next door or open space or park zones. And so the only zone that actually meets the minimum 500-foot separation from residential or open space or park is the mixed commercial zone. So that's the recommendation for the land use tables. And then the third topic for discussion this evening is related to residential beekeeping. There's quite a bit of extensive background on the beekeeping. Some of you may recall the ad hoc committee that was formed to discuss and study further residential beekeeping in the city. Ultimately, between the ad hoc committee and the policy committee, there's been some general support for expanding residential beekeeping in our residential zones. And so staff's done some review of other local ordinances and other information that was requested as part of the policy committee and ad hoc. Ultimately, what we're recommending is adding a new chapter to the zoning ordinance. This would be chapter 7 of the of Division D4 for residential beekeeping apiary. And this would essentially expand residential beekeeping, which currently is allowed in the rural conservation, hillside residential, and estate residential zones, and adding single-family residential zones to areas where residential beekeeping would be allowed. There are standards related to the ability for somebody to recreationally beekeep. You'll have to have at least a minimum 10,000 square foot lot size. There are hive maximums depending on the size of your property. And then we've also identified certain setback, height, flyaway barriers, water source requirements that would be part of somebody's zoning clearance application that they would file with the city. So that's for your consideration this evening. You'll see all of the proposed edits in attachment A of your staff report. We are available for questions. I know there may be some members of the public here that's interested in speaking, so I can make myself available now or after.
Do we have questions at this point before? Yeah, we're gonna do, all right. So open the public comment time. Do we have speaker cards?
No speaker cards
Okay.
or written public comment received for this item.
Okay, so we will close public comment on this topic. And now feedback, discussion.
Could we do these one at a time? Like stick with
Yes.
parking until we go to the next one? Till we go to the
I
next one?
I think that sounds like a reasonable request. All right. Parking, let's start with parking.
I did have a question on the residential housing program 19. Could you remind us, was that to be compliant with state law, or was that more about trying to encourage affordable or cost-effective building?
Sure. So related to supportive housing and the emergency shelters standards, those are directly in response to changes to state law. Related to the residential land uses and the parking standards for single family and multifamily, part of the housing elements review is an analysis of governmental constraints. and whether or not San Ramon's standards could potentially be a barrier to housing or housing production. And so in the housing element, in the analysis section of the housing element, you'll see some conversation comparing San Ramon standards to other cities. San Ramon is the only one in the Tri-Valley that requires an additional parking space beyond the 2 covered spaces. So one of the recommendations was to align closer to the Tri-Valley standards, respond to the fact that San Ramon has a lot of multi-generational or needs for expansion of sites without the additional added constraint of where do I put a 3rd covered parking space. And so that was one of the suggestions that came out of the housing element analysis, was a commitment that the city would evaluate our single-family residential standard and align that closer to what other jurisdictions are doing. And then on the multifamily, that also came from an analysis that if the city is currently requiring a 3rd parking space dedicated for units that are 4 bedrooms or higher in multifamily, that potentially means that a developer is not going to build larger multifamily units. And because one of the city's goals is to provide housing for all segments of the population, and that larger households tend to have a much more difficult time finding suitable housing for their needs, that was a consideration that the city would amend our zoning ordinance to reduce that parking requirement.
Thank you. And then does the zoning ordinance is the right place? The thought I had is similar to what we saw in BR7. Can an applicant propose an alternate means to meet that extra parking via, say, a shared parking? And does the zoning ordinance as presented allow for that flexibility, perhaps?
The way that our current zoning ordinance is written, we have a provision in there that discusses a reduced parking standard for affordable housing projects or senior housing development applications, and also in response to state density bonus law restrictions that limit how much parking we can require for a project that complies with state density bonus. We also have provisions in there that talk about shared parking and alternative compliance through a use permit process that an applicant would then pitch to the decision maker on whether or not a suitable alternative to the 3rd parking space can be done with their project. So once this standard goes into effect, unless that property owner is not proposing to meet the minimum 2 parking spaces on site, there is still going to be the ability for somebody to request an alternative with a shared parking, or maybe a shared parking structure, or an agreement with an adjacent property owner in proximity to the site. So
Great.
those still continue to remain as options for a
Options.
project.
Perfect. Thank you. No other questions? Anything else?
Okay. Parking questions?
I'm not sure this is a question, but let me give you some feedback. With respect to guest parking spaces for single-family homes, well, I would agree that that's something we should do. As I understand it, though, the guest parking spaces are linked to units that don't have driveways, parking aprons. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's the way that it's
All right,
currently
so it's a
drafted.
limited subset of housing developments. I guess the issue I have with the larger units above 4 bedrooms, you phrased it in terms of encouraging a developer to build larger homes on the theory that if they don't have to provide more parking, they'll be more amenable to providing more bedrooms. That's probably true in a sense. But the flip side of that is if you're encouraging larger units with the idea that they'll be multi-generational, it seems to me that what you're encouraging is more need for parking because presumably the multi-generational will be adults, many of whom will work, and in San Ramon, many of them will need to drive to work. So it seems to me counterproductive to cut down on parking for the type of housing that essentially looks to need more parking. That's sort of my thinking. I understand, the idea about constraints on development, but, our objective design standards are a constraint on development too. So I guess there's a sliding scale about what's more important. Are there any projects that have been built in the last, they say 5 years that have 5 or more bedrooms? I really remember 4 and 3s.
We've had a few requests, but the 3-car garage has typically been a difficult standard for developers to meet. We haven't had very many new construction projects requesting a 5th bedroom. And I don't know if that's because of the market or because of our standards. We do get a lot of inquiries from the front counter from people who currently own single-family units that are asking to add a 5th bedroom to their home or convert a room in their home to accommodate a 5th bedroom. And the difficulty for those existing homes is that the lots were not designed for a 3rd-car garage. And so that's been a limiting factor currently for existing single-family residents. There was a change in state law last year that became effective earlier this year that actually prohibits a city from requiring an additional parking space when somebody is doing modifications within their home to add a 5th bedroom. And so by default, new existing single-family homes already have the ability through what was just adopted this year to add an additional 5th bedroom without providing an additional parking space. So just some context, we don't have any new developments that have been asking for 5 bedrooms. And I'm not certain if that's because our standards are too restrictive or if it's the market is not supporting 5 bedrooms.
Now, I'm not a realtor, but I would guess it would be the latter. The market doesn't support 5 and 6 bedroom homes, at least in the suburbs. So that's my thoughts on parking. With the low hanging fruit would be to make our standards compliant with state law on supportive housing and shelters. I would agree with that. That's pretty low hanging. I did have a question though. I thought I saw a section in the staff report that talked about how you determine the number of parking spots for, I can't remember if it's assisted care or shelters, but it's based upon the number of employees per shift.
That's right. So and depending on the size of the shelter and the use permit that potentially may be part of that shelter, that it's based on the highest number of employees during a shift during the day. So
Well, the reason I ask is because it would seem logical that the day shift and the afternoon shift would have more employees than the night shift. So is what you're saying is that the standard for the number of parking spots is based on the largest number of employees in a shift?
right.
Okay. Thank you.
For my feedback, I like the simplicity of just adopting, 2 parking, 2-car garage, 2 parking places, whether it's multifamily or single family, just it's neat and clean. Yet you require 2 spots. So that's my feedback on that one. For parking.
Yeah, I would concur. I think it's just easier just to go with the 2 parking spots. I guess the concern I have or the question I have is we're trying to reduce the parking spots for larger bedroom houses because we're worried that people won't build them or whatever it is. is there any concern that if we're also requiring them to have one space for every 4 unit of single family, that they also not build those? Because where are they gonna put those additional spots all of a sudden? Because they still have to have the land now all of a sudden. So if it's every 4, instead of, let's say, instead of me building 16, because I don't have enough room for 4, I'm gonna build 12 because I only have room for 3.
Is this related to the guest parking?
Guest
The guest
parking,
parking?
yes.
So that is always a potential. Interesting in the housing element, there's a conversation about the guest parking requirement for multifamily. And it recognizes that because multifamily traditionally is not built with driveways, that it supports the ability for a city to require guest parking for multifamily. And so they did not see that as a governmental constraint to request guest parking spaces for multifamily. But given the shift of now single-family homes and developments being designed without garages as well, that's why we're recommending we take the same standard and the same logic that we applied to the multifamily and apply that to single-family. And so at least until we're told otherwise, that's what we would recommend to include. And it could potentially be identified by applicant as a financial constraint to them. In such case, they could request a waiver from that standard or a variance from that standard as part of their application. But there are still mechanisms in place that afford a developer to make that argument.
Yeah, I would just say realistically, all of the things that we're seeing are the no driveway and private roads. That's what's been coming forward. And they're almost all being proposed, at least on our housing element, in the Bishop Ranch area, where they have parking garages and they have commercial. And we saw tonight that Sunset was willing to respond when they didn't have to shared parking, which was the reason I asked, is it always an option too? So if they might not want to consume the land for guest parking on their property, they could propose an alternate way to meet that, which might, which works out for them and for us without making it impossible to build.
Yeah, I guess my concern is just eventually the parking is not going to be adequate enough for all the housing units, whether it be single family or multifamily or the apartments, all along Camino Ramon. Eventually, there's going to run out of space. So, and I'm just asking, and my thought is, if you're putting a condition on somebody saying 1 space for every 4 unit for guest parking, what's to deter them to not build as many because they don't have the acreage that they can do that.
Yeah.
So it's just the opposite devil's advocate kind of mentality of you're saying you should only have 2 instead of 3 because you're concerned that people won't build. Well, you could also have the same way. So it was just I don't know if there's actually any information that shows people have built more single family homes all of a sudden because now they don't have to put the guest parking, where we're seeing these combinations of multifamily and single family homes. So maybe they would have built more multifamily instead of just a single family because they could reduce the amount of guest parking. Now that won't happen in those areas. So it's just something to think about.
Okay. Okay, all right. Any other comments on parking? No. All right, so moving on to the next item, which is land use tables, correct? Okay. So I appreciate, for me, I appreciate your description of why we're eliminating 2 major ones. I have to say that when I read it the first time, it struck me as being like, are you sure we want to eliminate these? But I appreciate your explanation of the background on that. So can I, one of the questions is about well, basically construction materials and things like that. They're allowed in these new designations so long as they're indoors. So like for example, that would be more like along the lines of a Home Depot where everything is in a giant warehouse. And I guess the question then is, what are we considering indoors when we're talking about something that traditionally would just be sort of an open air outside business?
So you might be referring to, in table 2-6, there's a addition of construction contractor space indoor that has been added to table 2-6. There is a definition in the zoning ordinance of construction contractor space indoor, and to paraphrase, I don't have it right in front of me. It's over on the dais there, but it's essentially a contractor that might use his home base or her home base in a office setting where they might keep their tools or other supplies that they may need to provide the contracting services. But we currently don't allow for that in the MUR zone. That's the type of land use that is referred to for the construction contractor space.
Okay.
They wouldn't be able to provide their material storage, like their HVAC, air conditioning units in a outdoor pallet.
Okay.
But if they were to keep those indoors in their leased space, then that could be something that could be allowed through a minor use permit process.
Other land use table questions, comments? Commissioner Alpert?
I had a question. The adult-oriented business, I think I saw in the staff meet, it's a protected use. What does that mean?
So there is a provision in I think it's federal law that identifies that adult businesses can be a form of free speech or protected by the First Amendment. And so cities potentially would, without that protection, could decide that no adult businesses were allowed in their city and not identify a zone to allow for that type of land use. But because of the protection of free speech and First Amendment rights, cities have to identify a location where adult businesses could be located in your city. And so if you read Division D4-1, the city created those standards and section quite some time ago. Probably we made some amendments in 2012 when we last did our comprehensive update, but before that, it probably existed in 2009 when we did our previous update, and it codified the requirements and restrictions to establish such a business in the city, along with the radius and other requirements. And so that's because of the protected class, that the city has to look for an alternative now that we're removing MW.
Okay, and then that helped. That's helped. Thank you. Mixed commercial, the two highlighted in the maroon, the one that's over off of, I guess it's next to Danville. Does it have? I'm thinking that the space between that and residential or the Iron Horse Trail, I assume it's a legitimate location, given that the Iron Horse Trail might, in somebody's mind, consider a park or someplace where kids can hang out.
So the Iron Horse Trail is identified in our zoning ordinance as a park zone. That particular location is zoned as MC, but because of the radius distances, may not ultimately be able to locate a business in that area.
Okay.
Because of where the buildings are placed and the configuration of the buildings, you may be just above 500 feet to the residential neighborhood to the north,
Right.
but you may not be able to meet that to the east. And so that particular area, if somebody were to inquire about establishing an adult business there, potentially may not meet the radius requirements. And so they may have to look at the other locations in the city that are also zoned MC.
Okay, and then that was my second question. The other one is that little sliver along Camino Ramon and 680 there. And I can't remember if there's a tutoring center in there, one of those shops yet or not, but down the road there is. Yeah, but across the street, the
Is a
movie
church.
theater, wasn't that a housing opportunity site as well? And does that play into this at all?
It is a housing opportunity site. The way that the zoning ordinance is written is that it's residential zones, park zones, public, semi-public zones, and open space zones. Or uses, so residential uses is the other radius requirement. So until a residential use is actually established, it could potentially, a business, an adult business in the MC zone could potentially be established in the absence of a residential zone. But should residential be established in housing opportunity sites, that will again narrow the ability of a business to find a location that meets the standards.
Got it. Okay. Now that I think about it, I don't think there's a tutoring center in that part of the strip there. There's a Lego store, but it's not which I assume it's only for kids. So that's it on the adult. But I did also have a question on the letter that we got with the recommendation for including some of the, I'm not going to find it right fast enough, but the letter that you attached that
Yes.
had a dozen or so, proposed uses and recommendations. And I didn't do a really close stare and compare between the bullet list on the attachment to the MUR zone. Did we accept the recommendations and add them into the zoning table, or do we tonight need to provide feedback to y'all on that, or how does that play into this?
So I attached attachment C so that the commission can see some of the conversations that the city has been having with property owners and some requests that have been made about now with the interim uses going away, how do we then backfill those with appropriate uses? We reviewed the suggestions that were made as part of our zoning ordinance analysis. For the most part, the majority of the land uses, we were able to evaluate and consider those uses either through a use permit, a minor use permit, or zoning clearance or outright permitted as part of this process. I would say the exception to some of the ones that staff felt may not be as compatible with the MUR are going to be the auto-related uses, the auto repair and auto storage. Those are certainly up to the commission to consider and provide more direction on, but specifically, those are the two uses that we could not find as compatible to the MUR specifically.
That was my question. Thank you.
All right. Anything else on the land use, feedback on land use tables? Okay. All right, beekeeping. Well, as someone who was on the ad hoc committee back in the day, I'm pleased to see it back. And I think that from my perspective, when we sat through the initial one, I know that my first thought was, oh my gosh, it would be dangerous. And then as the discussion continued, it was pointed out that, in nature, the bees live wherever they want to live. And you're just as likely to, encounter a bee that lives in a tree next door than as you are for the neighbor who has hives. So I like the language. I'm in support of adding this to our code updates, zoning ordinances. So that's me. What's the buzz? Sorry, I just couldn't resist.
That's okay. I had a question. The lot size you propose is 10,000 square feet. Other cities that you put in your chart, with the exception of Concord, are around 6,000 square feet. Now, if you leave aside the large lot areas like rural conservation and things like that, how many homes would you say in San Ramon have 10,000 square foot lots, and where are they located?
So I don't have a number of units that would qualify for 10,000 square foot lot size or larger, but we do have a zone in the city, RS10 zone, that would, in theory, all of the lots there should have a minimum 10,000 square foot lot size or greater in that zone. So RS10 includes Inverness Park. It includes areas on Crow Canyon, south of Crow Canyon Road. It's all of the, I forget exactly the name, but has all the islands.
Yeah, Country View. That's where I live.
Country View. That's an RS10. There's a few other areas along the Iron Horse Trail, kind of South San Ramon, where the golf course is located, that has some RS10s there. And so, and then as you get kind of to the west side of the city, there are some areas in Twin Creeks that have that RS10 kind of closer to Norris Canyon Road and between Crow Canyon and Norris Canyon Road.
So how was the 10,000 square foot number arrived at, as opposed to 6,000 or 7,500?
So that was based on a conservative approach to expanding beekeeping, and looking at that in the past that the city had a concern about expanding beyond 1 acre. And so we thought perhaps this may be a good starting point for beekeeping. There are some standards that a property would have to meet as far as the flyaway barriers and the proximity to other sites. And so staff looked at 10,000 square feet as a good starting point to consider. If the commission is interested in lowering that requirement, there are RS7 zones, RS6 zones that also exist in the city that we could consider as an alternative as well.
Apart from Concord, did you find any other cities, say in NorCal, that have lot sizes 10,000 square foot and up as the minimum for beekeeping?
So there's been different staff members that have worked on this over the course of the last 4 years. And I don't have all of that history as far as what other cities that they've stretched beyond, but most of the cities that were identified in the table had the 6,000. Some actually did not regulate minimum lot size at all. So we did find more cities that had less restrictions and just allowed beekeeping without minimums. And then others that probably, to address comments or suggestions they've received in the past, identify a specific number. And so we could provide that at the next commission meeting if you're interested in.
Well, one of the questions I have is, are we setting the lot size minimums too large that basically rule out being able to do it? Now, you mentioned the RS10 zones, which I'll have to go back to my zoning map and figure out where those are. But the question, I guess, is it's not so much they would fit in there, but what has been the experience of other cities that allow for beekeeping at less than 10,000 square feet? I mean, the thing that was discussed at our meetings about beekeeping would be, yes, bees fly all over. Yes, they're wild bees, but if you've got a hive next to you, that's a little different than seeing a bee in a tree. What has been the experience of the other cities vis-a-vis what seemed to be the main concern, which was bee stings or bee taking over it? I remember when I lived in Oakland, the house next to me got invaded by an entire swarm of bees, and they had to be flushed out, I think, with some smoke. So I would like to know if the other cities have been able to provide any information about their experiences, the ones that have under 10,000, Lafayette and the like?
We can double check that information. I know that when we picked back up this effort this year in preparation of this meeting, we did circle back and speak to some cities. I don't think we covered all of them, but the conversation that took place was that we have very few applications or requests for beekeeping in general. And so there wasn't a whole lot of data or information that they could provide us with whether or not the standards have been too cumbersome or an issue for
Yeah,
beekeeping.
the sample size is rather small.
It's very small.
Through the chair, one other point that came up in some of the meetings in the past is it's very difficult to tell whether a bee sting impact is a result of a hive or a wild bee. We don't currently track them, so.
They don't have tags.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
Color coding, not yet.
Could
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, in the question of the 10,000 square feet, in Mark Armstrong's original submission, the recommendation at that time was limit 2 hives per property, 6,000 square feet or greater, and an additional hive per 2,500 square feet increments. So I do believe, and again, this is my recollection, as he cited Pleasanton, Livermore, Walnut Creek, Fremont, Moraga, Lafayette, Pleasant Hill, San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland. I'm not sure he investigated each of the cities, but I do recall that he was really quite thorough in his research in this original proposal. So that's to the size part. Commissioner Alpert.
On that question, so I happen to see how big my lot is, and it's 8,500 square feet. Not that I want to do bees. And then Mr. Armstrong's lot is 8,600 square feet. So, and I did actually talk to him to make sure I understood what we were talking about tonight. And then I have a tendency to look at a few other cities that I always look at, not these. I tend to look at Irvine and Elk Grove, and Irvine is down to 2,400 square feet. So anyways, I would be inclined to get more information on the lot size, but would be inclined to lower it to a lower number. I'm going to guess Mr. Chabon's house is probably less than 10,000 square feet, so don't go off and do bees. But the reason I would want to make it not such a high bar is one of our goals here is to make sure we don't have people bypassing our rules. And if we make it too onerous that someone's not going to register or do over the process, then we're not really accomplishing anything here. But I did also have a question, because in the land use table, it talks about zoning clearance required. And maybe I should know, but I couldn't find it. What is that? How does an individual that says they went and took a bee class and they want to get a beehive in their backyard, what is the process they would need to go through to get zoning clearance for this?
So the zoning clearance it's really a one-page application form that provides some details about the property owner and their application. But as part of that submittal for specifically residential beekeeping, they would also have to attach to their application form information about their lot size that they have. So a site diagram where the hives would be located, and then where the water source is in relation to that. So part of that application process would include the supporting documentation, and then you would provide that to the planning division, and we would evaluate to make sure that they've met the standards that we've identified in the zoning ordinance. And as a part of that review process, we would then, as staff, approve that if they meet the standards, and if they don't meet the standards, then they would be denied. But
Okay. Does that typically trigger a fee of some sort to the city?
It does. So there's a zoning clearance fee that's paid for the city to review the application.
Okay. You don't happen to know if it's a lot or a little off the top? Yeah.
It used to be
Several hundred,
$300.
maybe.
Yes, but it may
Okay.
potentially be closer to $5.
Thank you. Thank you, Louis.
Less than, yes, $7.99 and plus a technology fee.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that could also be a barrier for someone to go through the process, and that's sort of the goal to not. And then this is more of an implementation, maybe it's a question. How does the zoning ordinance and the CCNRs of a homeowners association play together? If the HOA CCNR says no bees, but the city says you can have bees, does one take precedence over the other?
Our zoning clearance doesn't require an applicant provide us documentation that their HOA allows for that beekeeping in their homeowners association. But we always encourage our applicants to make sure that they've checked all of the standards that apply to their property, including their HOA, if there are any restrictions to beekeeping in their HOA. And so it's the obligation of the property owner to make sure that they've checked that they meet all of the standards that apply to the property, whether it's private or public standards.
Okay, so if somebody comes saying the city said it was okay isn't a good excuse when they go back to their HOA, I guess, right?
Right.
Yeah, they're private covenants, and so the city is not party to those.
Okay.
We will review them as a course of a project approval, but we don't enforce them.
We don't enforce
So
that.
if
Okay.
they would get the permit from us and realize that, oh, HOA doesn't allow it, then it's a civil matter at that point in time.
Between them. Got it. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay.
So has this been helpful?
It has. I think just maybe is there some consensus regarding beekeeping is perhaps the feedback that if I could just make sure that I'm clear on where to go from that. The commission would like some additional information about lowering the standard from 10,000 to 6,000 square feet, and get some additional information from cities that currently have that standard to see if there's any issues with that lower standard for a lot size. But other than that, it sounds like a zoning clearance would still be the review process for
Is
this
there an
type of
option
use.
that doesn't require zoning clearance that makes sense? The $700 plus technology fee seems pretty steep to me. Yeah.
So the different types of permits that the city issues, you can outright allow a permitted use, which then does not require additional review by the city. So something like raising chickens, that was a conversation that the city had years ago about whether or not somebody could raise chickens in their backyard. So we have a whole chapter dedicated to raising chickens. So raising chickens is identified as where you can put the coop, how many chickens you can have, but it doesn't have a zoning clearance requirement. It just allows it as a permitted use so long as you abide by the standards that are in that chapter. So in the tables, you'll see raising chickens as a permitted use, and then there's a cross-reference to the chapter that says what you have to do to comply. In this case, right now, we have it identified with a ZC in the table that says zoning clearance, and then a reference to the section. Other, permit processes would be a use permit or a minor use permit. And so those are the options that the city has if we want to consider, similar to how we regulate chickens, applying that process to beekeeping in residential zones. That's something else to consider as well.
And then if you have a bad chicken raiser, it's based on a violation that's been reported. It's not like the city goes off and, here's a chicken and then goes and looks kind of thing, right? Yeah. Okay,
Chicken complaints are actually like a topic of conversation with code enforcement on pretty, frequent occasion. And it's partly because of roosters and chickens and how many chickens and
No doubt.
and the cleanup of chickens. And so we do get a lot of inquiries from residences that have are interested in chickens. But I think the standards are 6,000 square foot lot size and above for raising chickens. And so the 6,000 square foot has worked fairly well to regulate the impacts potentially that chickens may have. So, but yeah, it's a topic of conversation more than we
Who would have thought?
would expect.
Given that the population of bee keeping as a hobbyist is a very narrow, small population, and probably people that have gone through all the training that one would do, because I can't imagine going to Petco and buying 1,000 bees and saying, I'm going to be a beekeeper tomorrow. So I'd be inclined to start with minimal barriers versus high barriers. So if the, and on the other side, I don't want to trigger a lot of staff work to have to, talk to people, fill out forms, file forms, electronically keep everything. I think I'd be more inclined to trust the beekeepers that we have that want to do this and not make it too heavy of a speed bump to getting involved and being legal. Because I suspect that the beekeepers that are in the city might have some hives and they may not be legal. That's what I would. That'd be my inclination on this at the moment.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Commissioner Alpert. I mean, I don't know that we should make it any more difficult to raise a hive of bees than we do a pen of chickens for people, given the fact that the chickens have a larger amount of noise and things of that nature, and actually bring in probably some of the coyotes and so forth that we've been seeing coming down from the hills. I don't think coyotes go after bees as much. Maybe the honeys, but I don't know that we should make it any more difficult. I would say, when I was reading Mark's letter, that he actually looked at the chicken section and just kind of tried to duplicate it. I don't know why we wouldn't just utilize it in the same way. And so I tend to agree with Commissioner Alpert on that. Used to raise.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'd be as supportive of it becoming a permitted use as well. I think you can make a pretty strong argument that nobody just starts raising bees without really thinking about it. I know a lot of people will raise chickens without thinking about it, but not so much bees, I wouldn't think. Have an opinion? May the bee be with you.
I think zoning clearance is overkill for the issue we're talking about. I suspect that if you're going to install a hive or two in your backyard, that is a significant investment by you, not only in time, but money. And I don't think that a person is going to go through that unless they are fairly well assured that what they're going to do complies with the city standards. So I would agree with my fellow commissioners that the permit procedure that they're talking about seems to me at this point to be the more logical.
Okay, so I will do a little bit more research, come back at a future date when we're wrapping up the zoning ordinance text changes and provide you an update on that one particular provision. But it sounds like as far as the other changes that are proposed, we're going to go ahead and at least move forward with keeping those as part of the ongoing text amendment work that we're doing. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we have moved on to, do we have any updates from our respective committees?
I have one. I attended the Open Space Committee meeting last night. There was a scintillating presentation by John Muir Land Trust. But the most interesting thing that came out of the meeting was the fact that the Chang property has been sold. No one knows how much, or if they do know, they're not telling us, but it's been sold. So I don't know what that does for anything that we've looked at, but it sounds like if anything's going to happen, they're going back to square one. So.
I listened to the Parks and Community Services meeting, and it was largely devoted to a discussion of fees. What fees are coming in? What are they charging? How do they figure it out? And associated with trying to increase rentals and uses of their facilities. And they have a digital platform that they're using now to help people find the the renting of facilities much easier and agreeable and so forth. So they're pretty happy about that. And then there's a couple of big concerts coming up. So but it was mostly about fees and the budget issues. So thank you. All right, coming attractions.
Okay. January 7th, we have a continued public hearing item for Woodside Canyon, also referred to as the Triangle Building. And so again, that's gonna the packet will go out beginning of January, and you'll have it for this meeting on the 7th. In addition, we are moving forward with a joint council commission public hearing on general plan amendment for the FAR concept that was talked about a little bit tonight. And that's February 11th at this point. It needs to be confirmed still, but that's our target.
Okay. Do we have any idea of when the planning commission vacancy will get posted, or are we waiting for direction from city council? Or,
I believe it's been posted.
oh, okay.
I thought I saw something come through my email box. And so interviews interviews will not occur until the council member's been appointed. So that occurs in early January. So I would suspect sometime towards the end of January, there could be
Okay.
interviews. So it's still some time off.
Sure.
Yeah, not a lot, but maybe 45 to 60 days.
Okay, great, great. Well, we'll hope for an abundance of ready, willing, and able applicants. So, all right, anything else for the good of the order here?
I just wanted to
Yep.
wish everybody up here, all the way around, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
That's right. Well, thank you very much. And so on 8:46 p.m., December 17th, we are